What if the very foundations of the human essence were not developed through the slow progression of evolution, but are instead echoes of a divine tragedy that unfolded when gods still walked the banks of the Nile as kings? The journey into the afterlife remains an enigma born of an immortal epic that altered the fabric of reality forever. Before the golden sun first warmed these muddy shores, a vast silence rested heavily upon a formless darkness. Slow ripples of endless water whispered against unformed clay, waiting patiently for a vital spark of celestial awareness to awaken the sleeping earth. From this quiet void emerged a profound belief that the first mortal breath was drawn directly from the holy magic of supreme creators. Some whisper that early men blossomed like fragile lotus flowers, from shining tears weeping from the glowing eye of Ra, falling gently upon the waiting soil. Others murmur how a divine potter named Khnum shaped yielding human limbs upon a spinning clay wheel, mixing warm river mud with an eternal spirit. Still, other voices echo a tale of a supreme artificer named Ptah, who simply spoke these bodily vessels into physical reality through the powerful thought of his infinite mind. Regardless of which celestial hand sculpted their mortal frames, these earliest populations lived in a state of brutal savagery across a wild northern valley. They wandered aimlessly through dense papyrus swamps, without any structured laws, struggling daily to find basic sustenance among tangled aquatic roots. A heavy spiritual darkness clouded their unguided minds, leaving them entirely disconnected from the harmonious rhythm of the cosmos. To lift this struggling race out of deep ignorance, a benevolent deity descended from his starry habitation to rule directly over the green earth. This compassionate sovereign was known to his people as Osiris, arriving not as a distant guardian of resting souls, but as a living king of mortal flesh. He brought the brilliant light of civilization into an otherwise shadowed realm, establishing a peaceful era which later generations would forever revere as the true Golden Age. Guided by his supreme wisdom, wandering tribes finally learned to tame the wild landscape, turning chaotic marshes into ordered fields of rich agricultural loam. The good king showed them how to fashion heavy wooden hoes, teaching them to plant seeds of wheat before a receding flood dried into cracked yellow clay. He introduced strict codes of justice to govern their daily interactions, forever binding humankind to the sacred covenant of the cosmos. He softened their rough animalistic nature with beautiful melodies, instructing them in the peaceful arts of music, so that harmonious songs began to echo softly across flat expanses of cultivated green plains. This foundational era is central to Egyptian mythology, serving as a bright dawn of boundless human potential. It establishes the harmonious reign of Osiris and Isis, demonstrating how divine love could successfully transform the barren wilderness into a lush, vibrant garden of earthly delight. Devoted human subjects lived in absolute reverence of their great ruler, reaping immense and predictable bounties from a generous natural world. Every rural village thrived under his gentle, persistent guidance, trusting completely in the protective shadow cast by his divine royal presence. A magnificent prosperity swept over this united river valley, transforming previously desolate shores into a beautiful sanctuary of mortal flourishing. Yet a dark contrast existed just beyond those borders of emerald vegetation, hovering silently across a barren western ridge. A fierce brother named Set ruled over that endless waste of scorching red sand, embodying the sheer sterile power of prolonged withering drought. He was a force of absolute hostility, a creeping shadow of cosmic chaos, forever jealous of the nourishing moisture flowing through the eastern riverbed. If you are listening to this in the quiet hours of the night, enjoying the video as your thoughts begin to calm and your eyelids grow heavy, consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It helps these stories reach others who are seeking the same relaxing history to enable a restful sleep. If you like, let us know when and where you are joining us from in the comments section. There is something comforting in knowing that, at this very moment, people from around the world are gathering in this same quiet space to rest and relax in the continuance of history. And if you would like uninterrupted sleep and longer versions, those are available to you through the Legends of the Dawn membership. Now, let us return together to an era when the world of the Egyptian gods was in turmoil, and the story that later brought the dawn of one of the most ancient civilizations on Earth was just beginning to take shape. The malicious deity Set took his physical form in violent southern winds, blowing hot, dusty breath over delicate, newly sprouted crops. A gloomy temper consumed his fiery heart as he watched the ever-expanding glory of his beloved sibling. This profound duality between fertile green plains alongside the sterile desert perfectly embodied a sacred, prevalent truth, reflecting the eternal struggle between creation and destruction. He greatly despised the cheerful prosperity of those river settlements, plotting constantly to reclaim the flourishing black earth for his own silent kingdom of complete desolation. Seeking willing accomplices, he gathered 72 silent conspirators in hidden desert caves, whispering of treacherous designs to come. These envious minds quickly formed a dark alliance, dedicated entirely to overthrowing the established celestial order of peaceful rhythmic growth. Together they devised a cunning, methodical strategy to permanently remove the benevolent guiding light from a trusting mortal world. Using precious timber brought from distant northern forests, these unseen rebels fashioned a spectacular wooden chest fit for a king. Every smooth surface was richly ornamented with shining beaten gold, painted with bright inviting colors to cleverly conceal their deeply malicious intent. This deadly box was secretly crafted to match the exact physical measurements of the unsuspecting king. When the season of harvest celebrations finally arrived, Set invited his royal brother to a magnificently lavish evening banquet. Lacking any suspicion of betrayal, Osiris unknowingly entered the grand festive hall, filled entirely with smiling, deceptive traitors. Sweet, fragrant incense drifted heavily through the warm night air, masking the cold, unseen tension of an impending tragedy. The glorious Queen Isis rested quietly in her own distant palace, unaware of the dark, deceptive shadow silently falling over her beloved husband. After numerous courses of rich food were merrily consumed, attendants carried that gleaming wooden container into an illuminated central courtyard. A chorus of loud admiration rose from gathered guests, praising the flawlessly exquisite craftsmanship of its decorated panels. Set watched with calculating, predatory eyes, waiting patiently for the perfect moment to spring his devious trap. Feigning a jovial generosity, this wicked host declared he would give the precious box to whoever could fit perfectly inside it. Various accomplices stepped forward to try their luck, discovering the space to be slightly too long or somewhat too wide. They surrendered their turns with mock disappointment, paving a clear path for their intended victim to accept the fatal challenge. Osiris approached the ornate coffin with a peaceful smile, admiring the smooth polish of its fragrant cedar walls. He lay down willingly within its narrow confines, finding his immortal limbs supported exactly by the measured wooden frame. In that fleeting second of innocent triumph, a monstrous trap was violently sprung by eager waiting hands. Those 72 conspirators rushed forward from shadowed corners, ruthlessly slamming the heavy lid shut upon their defenseless ruler. They drove thick iron nails into the solid wood, ensuring that every seam was sealed tightly with streams of burning molten lead. The glorious founder of human civilization was suddenly cast into a narrow, breathless void where the very atmosphere grew heavy and thin, leaving him to gasp against the weight of absolute stillness as the world above was silenced forever by his own treacherous kin. Moving swiftly under the cloak of midnight, this wicked assembly carried their tragic burden down toward a silent riverbank. They cast the sealed box into dark waters at the northern Tonitic mouth of the sprawling moonlit delta. A gentle current caught that heavy vessel, sweeping it slowly away toward an endless unknown sea. The golden era of peace drifted away with that floating tomb, leaving an awakened humanity to face a sudden terrifying absence. Soft ripples washed quietly against muddy shores, carrying the lingering memory of a fallen king into a distant watery void. Endless stars circled patiently above a sleeping valley, watching the slow descent of the ancient world into a vast unbroken night. The luminous age of order abruptly gave way, scattering shards of terror across a previously tranquil river valley. Heavy winds from the scorching southern desert swept across fertile fields, replacing the benevolent rule of Osiris with overwhelming dread. Early mortals watched helplessly as green shoots withered under the aggressive heat, plunging a fragile civilization back towards its previously savage state. A creeping darkness quickly overtook the brilliant light of civilization, threatening to erase all memory of an ordered human existence. Without a benevolent earthly ruler to guide their hands, helpless farmers watched their crops wither into brittle yellow husks. A sterile desert reclaimed its lost territory, burying cultivated ground under a suffocating blanket of dry red dust. Those cheerful melodies of a former peaceful era faded quickly into a distant memory. A deafening silence descended over mud-brick villages, broken only by the weeping of frightened families. Their magnificent, sweeping prosperity had completely collapsed, leaving a starving nation completely exposed to sudden cosmic wrath. Word of this devastating betrayal soon reached the distant palace of the magnificent goddess of magic, Isis, who rested unaware. A heavy veil of sorrow descended immediately upon her radiant face. Her beloved companion had been cast into a watery void, leaving the royal throne entirely empty under the pale moonlight. Overcome by such vast grief, a once glorious sovereign sheared her shining hair in a traditional gesture of mourning. She cast aside all shimmering silks of royal authority, draping her limbs in dark woven robes of earthly lamentation. The eternal romance between Osiris and Isis seemed violently severed, forcing a lonely widow to wander across the desolate landscape. She abandoned her magnificent palaces in an agonizing display of ultimate loss, offering a physical manifestation of her broken heart. Her tears fell constantly upon the dry earth, mirroring the divine sorrow of a mourning heaven. The once vibrant goddess now resembled a silent shadow, drifting endlessly through the chaotic realm of living men. Isis still possessed an immense celestial power, yet her visionary gaze could not penetrate the watery veil hiding her husband. A sinister spell woven by 72 treacherous conspirators temporarily obscured the divine location of that sunken wooden chest. She was forced to rely upon ordinary mortal senses, walking barefoot across a burning earth. Ancient papyri speak of her desperate pilgrimage through dusty villages alongside muddy banks of the great river. She pursued any lingering trace of a floating coffin, asking every passing stranger for news of a murdered king. Dismissive adult minds remained entirely ignorant of her tragic quest, but an unexpected wisdom flowed freely from a much younger generation. Innocent children playing idly beside water reeds possessed a strange clairvoyance concerning the hidden path of that sacred vessel. Their seemingly simple prattle guided the wandering deity, pointing a sure way toward the immense northern sea. She followed the salty wind beyond familiar sandy borders, stepping wearily upon foreign shores of a distant Syrian land. Ocean currents had carried the sealed coffin far away from the Egyptian delta, tossing it upon restless waves for many moons. A steady tide had finally cast this precious cargo upon a rocky coastline near the ancient port of Byblos. A gentle swell pushed that heavy wooden box into the tangled embrace of a young tamarisk plant. Salt water washed continuously over its beautifully painted surface, unable to erase the divine magic holding it together. Marine creatures revered this passing wooden vessel, guiding it safely through treacherous coastal reefs. A mighty sea recognized the sacred king, delivering his body gently toward the safety of a sheltering foreign beach. Nourished by the divine presence hidden within, this fragile shrub rapidly expanded into a massive, fragrant tree. The remarkable vitality pulsing from its buried immortal core fed those thirsty roots with an unearthly strength. This botanical giant produced a heavy canopy of thick leaves, casting deeply cooling shadows upon the sun-baked shore. A sweet, intoxicating fragrance drifted continuously from its massive trunk, masking the scent of death with the perfume of eternal life. Thick branches completely enveloped the gilded tomb, hiding its silent king deep within a protective layer of living wood. King Melkender of Byblos eventually marveled at the tremendous girth of this towering seaside marvel. He commanded his woodcutters to fell a fragrant trunk, completely unaware of the sacred tragedy resting inside. Strong axes severed its sturdy root, transforming this beautiful coastal tree into a massive wooden pillar for a royal palace. Skilled artisans shaped its majestic timber into an architectural wonder, smoothing its rough bark into polished surface. The natural beauty of this grand support column became a famous centerpiece of the Syrian royal court. A hidden sarcophagus still rested silently within its core, waiting patiently for rescue by the wandering goddess. She arrived shortly after this architectural triumph, exhaustion taking over her divine form as she rested beside the quiet village fountain. Her sorrowful presence attracted the sympathetic gaze of Queen Astarte, who invited this mysterious stranger to enter the grand royal household. Refusing to speak of her own celestial origins, Isis humbly accepted a lowly position as a royal nurse. She cared tenderly for an infant prince, feeding the small child by allowing him to suckle her own divine finger. A potent immortal magic flowed quietly through this simple nourishment, offering the fragile human infant a rare gift of eternal life. During the stillness of night, a disguised goddess sought to burn away all traces of mortal weakness of her tiny charge. She bathed the sleeping babe in a purifying celestial fire, resting his body gently in its luminous flames, while transforming her own body into a dark swallow. Her bird-like form fluttered continuously around the massive wooden pillar, mourning her lost husband hidden within its fragrant core. Suddenly, a terrified Syrian queen interrupted this sacred nocturnal ritual, shrieking at the sight of her son lying amongst the flames. Her sudden panic instantly broke the protective spell, depriving the royal heir of an immortal destiny. A startled Isis immediately resumed her true majestic form, illuminating the dark chamber with an overwhelming celestial radiance. She gently demanded that the great tamarisk pillar be yielded completely into her own hands. Astonished Syrian rulers willingly surrendered their structural masterpiece, watching silently as a mighty goddess cleaved its solid wooden shell. She carefully stripped away its protective outer layer, treating every splinter as a highly venerated object of intense devotion. The fragrant wooden casing was left behind to bless the royal Syrian household, serving as a permanent memorial of her celestial visit. She reclaimed her gilded treasure with a fierce maternal grasp, carrying it back toward her native soil. Avoiding the hostile gaze of a treacherous brother, she transported this silent vessel into a dense, aquatic wilderness. The vast expanse of secluded Egyptian marshes offered a perfect temporary sanctuary for the resting monarch. Dense thickets of green vegetation provided a natural fortress against wandering eyes of hostile spies. Muddy waters formed a protective barrier around a small island, isolating the grieving queen from the chaotic world outside. She sat alone beside a gilded coffin, pouring out her soul in a quiet song of endless sorrow. Tall papyrus reeds provided a humble shelter, allowing her to weep freely over the motionless form of her companion. She was finally able to mourn his passing in peace. Pouring sweet-scented oils over his sealed coffin, she whispered ancient incantations into the still, humid air. But this temporary victory over dark desert forces was tragically destined to be undone by a cruel twist of celestial fate, for Set often traveled through those very same quiet swamps, hunting wild animals under a starry canopy. He drove his chariot across muddy banks, pursuing fierce river boars by the pale illumination of a midnight moon. His fierce hounds scoured the watery terrain, tracking wild prey through thick patches of floating vegetation. A pale lunar glow illuminated the dark landscape, casting long shifting shadows across the muddy floor of a silent swamp. This wicked predator rejoiced in the savage exertion of his midnight sport, completely unaware of the hidden prize resting nearby. During one particular excursion, the pale light revealed a familiar shape resting among tangled green reeds. Set recognized the beautifully painted chest immediately, realizing his rival had returned from his watery grave. A blind fury consumed his jealous heart, driving him to ensure that any influence of Osiris would be forever destroyed. He shattered the sealed lid, casting the remains of the former king out upon the damp floor of a silent marsh. With a heart hardened by ambition, he divided the sacred form of his brother into 14 separate parts, determined to erase every physical trace of his sibling's essence. He sent these fragments drifting toward the far corners of the horizon, scattering them across the vast and varied landscape of Egypt, so they may never be reunited. The malicious deity laughed triumphantly over his hollow victory, believing his absolute dominance was finally secured forever. He rode his chariot back toward the sterile western desert, leaving a shattered golden age behind him. A heavy silence fell across those empty marshes as the very earth seemed to cradle the scattered essence of the beloved king. Some remnants sank deep into muddy riverbeds, while others fell upon dry stretches of barren rock. Dark shadows of an arid desert stretched farther than ever before, creeping ominously toward the fragile center of human civilization. Men forgot their civilized arts, focusing only on their fear of a daily return of the scorching southern wind. The great king now awaited a miraculous intervention, trapped in the silent void between the physical world and the spiritual realm. His fragmented body lay hidden across unknown locations, awaiting a patient regathering. A sorrowful Isis was forced to begin her weary travels all over again, determined to restore the unbreakable cosmic balance. Isis gathered tall stalks of green vegetation growing thickly along muddy banks of a sluggish waterway. She refused to surrender the sacred cosmic balance to the devastating will of sterile desert winds. A deep celestial magic stirred within her mournful heart, promising a miraculous restoration for the shattered earthly king. She wove these slender reeds together with skilled patience, fashioning a light vessel to navigate the treacherous flooded expanse. This simple papyrus boat glided silently across dark pools, carrying her solitary figure through the dense aquatic wilderness. Beneath the murky surface lurked fierce river predators, possessing massive jaws capable of snapping solid timber. Yet these scaly beasts recognized the sacred nature of this woven craft, refusing to attack her fragile floating sanctuary. Instead, they sank respectfully into muddy depths, allowing the grieving goddess to pass unharmed across their watery domain. She drifted slowly through tangles of heavy lotus leaves, searching every shadowed inlet for remnants of her beloved. Watery currents had gently deposited his scattered remnants among thick roots of towering green papyrus stems. She retrieved each precious fragment with an absolute devotion, placing them securely upon the woven deck of her stealthy craft. The heavy burden of her agonizing quest was soon shared by a darkly beautiful sister named Nephthys. This lady of descending shadows offered a comforting embrace, joining the weeping widow upon her lonely reed boat. Together they scoured an endless network of winding channels, recovering the physical foundation of a lost golden age. Their divine mourning also attracted two other mighty celestial beings who descended quietly to those isolated northern swamps. The jackal-headed god Inubus brought his mysterious knowledge of preserving mortal flesh from relentless decay. He was accompanied by a wise ibis-headed deity named Thoth, carrying secret words of infinite celestial power. This silent assembly gathered upon a hidden marshy island, determined to reverse the terrible destruction wrought by Set. Isis stood alongside these powerful allies, pooling their vast celestial knowledge to forge a magnificent miracle. Together, they invented the deeply sacred art of embalming, creating a physical vessel capable of surviving an eternity. Anubis carefully cleansed every recovered fragment of the revered king, washing away all traces of a cruel mutilation. His remnants were methodically bathed in purifying pools of sweet water, anointing them with fragrant oils drawn from distant cedar forests. The rich perfume of crushed myrrh drifted through humid air, masking the heavy scent of earthly corruption. Those divine attendants arranged every purified part into the perfect likeness of a sleeping human form. They bound his resting limbs tightly together, utilizing a seamless cloth woven in 1,000 delicate folds. This endless linen shroud wrapped around the fallen monarch in a brilliant white cocoon, permanently securing his physical entity. This supreme act of supernatural devotion produced an incorruptible body, completely defying all natural laws of earthly decay. This very first mummy became known as the sacred Karast, an anointed figure designed to endure for millions of years. The quiet marshland witnessed a staggering triumph over death, as the resting king lay perfectly preserved upon his wooden bier. During this intricate physical preservation, Thoth whispered potent incantations over every layer of white linen wrapping. These highly sacred verses contained a vast wisdom, destined to become a protective foundation for all future mortal journeys. These spells were recorded within a revered text, known natively as the Chapters of Coming Forth by Day. Generations of future men would later copy these exact magical formulas, burying them alongside their own sleeping relatives. the sacred Book of the Dead offered a safe passage through a dangerous underworld, guided entirely by this original divine triumph. Every spoken spell anchored a fragile human soul, tethering it securely to the path of immortal resurrection. A crowning achievement of this meticulous restoration occurred when the royal head was finally recovered. This most sacred fragment was eventually buried at the holy city of Abydos, establishing a permanent geographical anchor for an entire mythos. The ancient town became a highly venerated center of supreme devotion, drawing endless pilgrims to honor their sleeping lord. Though his physical form was flawlessly reconstructed, the silent mummy remained entirely devoid of animating breath. A cold stillness clung heavily to his anointed limbs, requiring a supreme act of celestial magic to awaken his resting heart. Isis once again transformed her own radiant body into a beautiful hovering bird, spreading her feathered wings over his quiet face. She fluttered gracefully above the motionless chest of her husband, creating a gentle rushing breeze with her beating plumage. This rhythmic fanning generated a vital breath of life, directing a warm current of air into his lungs. She chanted powerful incantations into the shadowy darkness, calling his wandering spirit back to its preserved earthly vessel. Her transcendent love penetrated right through the heavy veil of death, stirring a dormant energy within his cold, sleeping frame. A miraculous spark of vitality temporarily animated his bound limbs, answering the passionate call of his devoted wife. During this fleeting moment of magical resuscitation, she drew his divine essence from him to conceive a child who may carry on his glorious work. This royal lineage was miraculously secured from beyond the gloomy threshold of a grave, defying the absolute finality of mortal breath. Isis sheltered a newly planted seed of immortal light within her own protective womb. But this temporary reawakening could not permanently restore the murdered sovereign to his former throne of the waking world. His spirit could no longer reside among fields of living men. His beautifully preserved Karast belonged entirely to the shadowed realm, waiting below the surface of a sunlit earth. Soon a heavy slumber reclaimed his reconstructed body, forcing his divine soul to seek a different domain of absolute authority. He descended slowly into a vast subterranean region, entering a hidden twilight kingdom known as Amenta. This mysterious underworld offered a majestic new sovereignty, far removed from the scorching heat of the western sands. With this descent, the divine king of early Egypt transformed gloriously into an eternal judge of the dead, seated upon a throne of absolute truth. He became the supreme god of the underworld, ruling over a quiet dimension of resting spirits. His radiant presence illuminated the gloomy abyss, providing a comforting beacon for all future souls traveling through the long night. Within a grand hall of two truths, he established a flawless scale to measure the righteousness of all arriving mortals. Every human heart was weighed carefully against a feather of cosmic balance, determining the final destination for all traveling spirits. He offered a merciful sanctuary to those who lived justly, rewarding an honest earthly existence with a beautiful immortal peace. This tale of treachery inadvertently opened a miraculous gateway for ordinary men to achieve everlasting life. The path cleared by his own divine resurrection became a heavily trodden road for endless generations of dreaming mortals. By copying his sacred embalming rituals, every common laborer could eventually hope to share in his glorious eternal kingdom. A quiet serenity settled over those hidden northern marshes, replacing the violent chaos of a shattered golden age. Gentle ripples of water washed against tall green reeds, singing soft lullabies to the resting earth. A heavy magic lingered peacefully in the cool night air, promising a bright dawn after the long season of lamentation. Far below the sleeping surface of the ancient river valley, where the world of the living gives way to the eternal deep, the resurrected king closed his eyes upon a throne of perfect justice. His endless realm of tranquil spirits operates with the slow, unbroken precision of the turning stars. A gentle slumber rested upon the hidden underworld, while a different kind of magic blossomed above. Deep within her mortal womb, a grieving widow carried the precious spark of celestial light. She sought a secure refuge tucked far away from the relentlessly scorching breath of the desert winds. Dense thickets of floating papyrus stretched across a northern landscape near the ancient settlement of Chemis. These watery marshes offered the perfect sanctuary for a hunted queen seeking the protection of absolute isolation. Their tall green reeds formed an impenetrable woven fortress against all hostile searching eyes. Murky channels wound silently between small islands of dark yielding mud. Scaly reptiles gliding beneath the quiet surface once again recognized a divine presence entering their aquatic realm. They offered a silent allegiance to Isis as she prepared her secretive haven. She fashioned a humble shelter from gathered lotus stalks, alongside fragrant river herbs. This fragile cradle floated gently upon the calm expanse of shallow dark water. A heavy canopy of broad leaves provided cooling shadows from the blazing afternoon sun. Here within a verdant isolation she brought forth the golden child. A radiant infant emerged from darkness to illuminate a shaded watery sanctuary. He was the fragile embodiment of a new cosmic hope for the entire waiting world. Egyptian mythology reveres this tiny boy as a returning light destined to restore the broken balance. His birth represented a quiet triumph following the death of Osiris. Still, this newborn son remained incredibly vulnerable amidst the untamed wilderness. The eternal bond between Osiris and Isis had remained unbroken despite their cruel physical separation. She left her sleeping babe only occasionally to gather edible roots alongside sweet berries growing upon distant banks. She wove powerful spells of protection over his cradle before stepping away into the surrounding marshlands. Her magical incantations formed an invisible shield around her resting infant. She commanded every creature of the land, alongside every swimmer in the water, to spare her vulnerable child. An absolute silence settled over their hidden nest while the tired mother sought basic sustenance. Yet a creeping malice still lingered just beyond those borders of emerald vegetation. Set observed the glowing radiance emanating faintly from the northern delta, recognizing the surviving spark of his hated rival. This force of withering drought could not personally penetrate the magical barrier woven by the celestial queen. Instead, he would summon a creeping emissary of darkness from the barren wasteland of red sand. One venomous scorpion answered the silent call of this malignant desert ruler, its segmented tail twitching with a cold, rhythmic malice in anticipation. Emerging silently from the shifting dunes, this creature fell to the ancient pull of Set's destructive will, its jointed legs clicking softly. 7 scorpions had previously guarded a wandering widow during her long, sorrowful journey. But this newly summoned creature served only a destructive will of absolute chaos, scuttling silently across dry, cracked earth toward the lush green border of the watery domain. Moving effortlessly over floating lily pads and tangled roots, it evaded every protective spell, its dark segmented body carrying a venom older than human memory. This agent of malice crept undetected into the shaded cradle of the sleeping golden babe. Its venomous tail struck downward with a sudden, terrifying precision. One deadly sting pierced his delicate, immortal flesh with a burning drop of concentrated desert fire. before retreating quickly into murky depths. A piercing cry of agony shattered the tranquil peace of those green marshes. That sharp wail echoed violently across the flat expanses of the surrounding river valley, carrying with it a devastating message of doom to a foraging mother wandering far away. Isis dropped her gathered food instantly upon the muddy shore. She rushed back through tangled reeds with the frantic desperation of a terrified mortal parent. She pushed aside heavy green stalks with an uncharacteristic clumsy haste, her bare feet splashing heavily through shallow pools of standing water. Sheer stark dread gripped her divine heart in utter terror as she reached her secluded island sanctuary. She found her beautiful boy lying motionless within his woven nest. Every trace of golden radiance had faded entirely from his tiny body. That fiery poison raced violently through the fragile network of his unformed veins. This future avenger of the fallen king lay utterly defeated before his great journey could even begin. Heartbroken, Isis threw her arms wide in a gesture of absolute despair. She lifted her lifeless infant from his cradle with a sudden rush of overwhelming grief. Her weeping face pressed closely against his cooling cheek. Deep, agonizing shrieks of maternal loss erupted from her trembling throat. This sound carried the immense weight of her cosmic sorrow upward into an azure sky. It was a cry so devastating that it shook the very foundation of our visible universe. The staggering volume of her lamentation ascended from the stricken earth, climbing toward the celestial vault where the sun god Ra pursued his eternal passage. So profound was her cry that it seized the massive rhythmic mechanics of heaven, halting the supreme course of his solar vessel dead in its tracks. Time itself hung suspended over the weeping mother, holding her lost child. Absolute silence fell across all creation as the Supreme Creator listened to her tragic plea. His celestial boat paused directly above their hidden nursery. A blinding ray of pure sunlight pierced downward through the thick canopy of broad leaves. This brilliant illumination revealed the tragic scene unfolding upon the dark, muddy shore below. She demanded a miraculous intervention to save this fragile seed of an unyielding divine love. This dark triumph of Set could not be allowed to extinguish the last remaining hope of all mortal men. Her powerful magical voice compelled the supreme deity to answer her desperate pleas. Deliverance descended on swift wings from the heavens. Through the stagnant air of the delta, a wise scribe of the celestial courts made his rapid descent, cutting through the stillness like a falling star. Thoth, the ibis-headed master of hidden truth, arrived upon that muddy, secluded isle, bearing within his silent form the ancient secrets and supreme authority of the eternal gods. He appeared with a quiet majesty, comforting the weeping goddess in her darkest hour of despair. His tranquil presence helped to ease the frantic terror consuming her broken heart. Thoth spoke with a resonant voice that carried the absolute certainty of eternal life. His commands directed the fiery venom to release its deadly grip upon the resting infant. Each powerful spell began to purge the malicious desert heat, cleansing it from those tiny veins. The scorching poison drew outward, piling upon the dark, damp soil below, before seeping harmlessly away into the depths of the earth. Sweet, cooling relief washed slowly over the resting infant, restoring his golden radiance. Thoth recited ancient formulas establishing a permanent, protective barrier around him. He promised that this miraculous healing would secure the rise of Horus to come, for the young god was destined to grow into a mighty warrior of unmatched strength. Warm, vibrant color returned gradually to his pale cheeks as the steady pulse of his beating heart resumed its rhythmic pace. The sweet fragrance of river lotus filled those tiny lungs once again with refreshing breaths of new life. He opened his bright eyes to gaze upon the exhausted, smiling face of his mother, whose relief was as vast and deep as the river itself. The boy's cosmic destiny was now tethered securely to the living fabric of an unbroken celestial harmony. Our resurrected hero would eventually wield the full majestic power of the Eye of Horus against all forces of darkness. The mighty manjet of Ra resumed its slow, majestic journey across the high blue skies. The turning wheel of planetary seasons began to rotate once more with a flawless precision. Every natural rhythm of the waking world was completely restored to its perfect working order. With the balance of the cosmos mended, forcing the shadow of death to retreat, Thoth ascended once more, returning to his eternal station amongst his celestial crew. He left behind a scene of tender peace, a joyous mother nursing her healthy infant beneath the protective emerald embrace of the shaded canopy. A calm tranquility descended gently over the hidden sanctuary of the northern delta, as the river itself seemed to whisper sweet lullabies to the golden child of hope. This fragile spark of light was now safe from any further creeping malice. Horus would grow steadily amongst tall reeds into a towering pillar of divine strength, learning the ancient wisdom of the natural world from his devoted magical guardian. He absorbed the potent celestial energy flowing freely from her protective embrace. The fragile newborn soul transformed gradually into a robust vessel of divine resilience. Soft, cooling breezes drifted through dense aquatic vegetation to soothe his waking hours, while the golden sun warmed his growing limbs with a daily infusion of unearthly vitality. Within the velvet silence of those emerald marshes, a celestial storm was quietly gathering its strength. This secluded nursery, shielded by the swaying papyrus, nurtured the hidden prince as he began to consolidate the tremendous power required to one day reunite a fractured mortal realm. His long and arduous journey toward the final cosmic reckoning had, by a miracle of divine grace, commenced within the humble confines of a muddy cradle. Far to the west, the dark shadow of Set still loomed over the barren expanse of the sleeping valley. The wicked usurper remained blissfully unaware of the healing miracle wrought by Thoth's wisdom, nursing the false belief that the last threat to his absolute dominion had been permanently erased from the living earth. He did not know that beneath the Delta's canopy, his destiny was already being unmade. A deceptive calm now wrapped the entire nation in the tight, shimmering embrace of the desert heat. The mortal population waited in unknowing silence for the sudden breaking of a new golden dawn, unaware that the child growing amidst the reeds was a secret weapon being forged in the patient isolation of the water. He was the promise of a future they could not yet see, a restoration of the light that had been stolen away. The death of Osiris was no longer a final defeat, but a necessary step toward an ultimate cosmic renewal. The tiny, vulnerable infant matured steadily into a powerful adult warrior, preparing to reclaim his stolen inheritance. The Rise of Horus became an undeniable cosmic reality as he mastered ancient martial arts within his watery sanctuary. During those long, silent nights, the goddess of magic continued to weave powerful spells of hidden protection around his growing limbs. Meanwhile, the spirit of his father guided his growing intellect, whispering secret strategies of divine warfare. Osirus shared a vast subterranean wisdom to prepare his eager son for the inevitable battle against gathering forces of darkness. Horus absorbed this ancient knowledge with a fierce dedication which burned deeply within his immortal breast. He learned how to command shifting winds and master the ability to strike with the blinding speed of a diving falcon. His physical muscles hardened into unyielding cords of tremendous power capable of wielding heavy weapons forged from solid iron. Rumor of this living heir eventually reached loyal mortal settlements stretching along the fertile river valley. Ordinary men remembered the harmonious golden age of Osiris and Isis with a deep, abiding reverence. They eagerly abandoned their heavy wooden plows, forming a vast human army marching proudly alongside their young deity. These brave farmers left their quiet villages to march behind the floating banners of a newly rising leader. Their bare feet beat a steady rhythmic pulse against the dusty soil of a renewed nation. They trusted completely in the divine magic flowing from their chosen commander to shield them from a withering desert heat. This united force of celestial beings alongside mortal men advanced resolutely toward the barren western ridge. They carried shining weapons forged from rare metals brought from distant southern mountains. A fierce determination filled every beating heart as they sought to permanently erase the oppressive shadow which had taken hold of their land for so long. Set perceived this approaching storm of righteous vengeance blowing swiftly across his desolate red sands. This entity of darkness gathered his own monstrous army to defend his stolen throne. Terrible agents of cosmic chaos were summoned from hidden desert caves to meet the advancing tide of restorative justice. Realizing his ground forces needed a supreme celestial vantage point, our young avenger initiated a breathtaking physical transformation. He shed his human likeness to become a magnificent, multicolored winged disk, ascending rapidly into a bright azure sky. Great feathers of gold blending with lapis lazuli stretched outward, to cast a protective shadow over his marching legions. From this immense height, he tracked the shifting movements of hostile desert troops maneuvering below. His sweeping gaze penetrated heavy dust clouds, concealing the malicious usurper preparing a deadly ambush on a nearby riverbank. The flying solar disk darted downward with a terrifying velocity, striking the first decisive blow against this malicious force. Seeking refuge from the blinding aerial assault, those wicked followers of Set plunged frantically into the muddy currents. Within those dark waters, they transformed into monstrous crocodiles and massive hippopotami. Their huge scaly tails whipped the calm surface into a chaotic churning foam of muddy white spray. Fierce waves crashed violently against the painted hull of the sacred solar vessel, carrying our divine avenger. Set's army snapped their massive jaws, attempting to splinter its solid cedar planks into floating debris. The murky water churned with the sudden explosive violence of this desperate aquatic ambush. A specialized group of celestial metalworker blacksmiths called Mesenti quickly took to the surrounding water to defend their sailing vessel. These loyal followers of Horus grasped heavy iron lances attached to long coils of thick metal chains. They stood firmly upon the wooden decks, waiting patiently for a precise moment to attack. Sparks of celestial fire seemed to fly from their metal weapons as they defended the floating sanctuary of light. Their coordinated strikes fell in a perfect unison, matching the steady beating of a hidden cosmic drum. These fearless craftsmen formed an impenetrable wall of physical strength against the rising tide of demonic fury. The chaos commenced as heavy chains whistled through humid river air. Sharp iron harpoons pierced thick reptilian armor with a methodical precision, their dark, monstrous bodies sinking motionlessly into deep, muddy pools. With every victory, the men came closer to securing safe passage for their floating sanctuary. Blood stained the chaotic waters of the foaming river as these divine craftsmen systematically eliminated their enemies. Every thrown spear found a lethal mark among snapping jaws hiding beneath the disturbed surface. any immediate threat to the sacred solar vessel was entirely neutralized by their unwavering martial discipline. With his aquatic army utterly decimated, an enraged Set emerged from the tangled thicket of river reeds, assuming the terrifying shape of a roaring serpent intertwined with a gigantic red hippopotamus. He charged blindly towards the descending winged disk, with jaws open wide to consume the radiant light of heaven. An earth-shaking collision echoed across the trembling valley as these two eternal enemies finally collided in direct physical combat. The golden hawk struck downward with an irresistible momentum, shattering the massive jaw of his cruel adversary. He overthrew the red beast upon a trampled, muddy shore, binding his heavy limbs with unbreakable links of cold iron. During this vicious final struggle, the desperate god managed to tear away one luminous eye from his winged conqueror. Thoth descended swiftly from his starry vault to recover this precious stolen light from the bleeding grip of darkness. The wise scribe restored perfect vision to the triumphant hero, before about Set was dragged before the celestial tribunal. An assembly of ancient deities looked down upon this wicked usurper, shackled in chains, kneeling helplessly in wet river mud. They formally stripped Set of all temporal authority over the green world he had so violently ravaged. The destruction of the Golden Age had officially been avenged, as a divine pantheon joyfully recognized Horus as the true surviving heir of the betrayed king. The triumphant avenger reclaimed his rightful earthly throne, uniting those divided lands once again under a single peaceful rule. With his divine guidance, the delicate balance between the fertile black earth and barren red sand was renewed. A symphony of joy erupted from mortal settlements as the heavy shroud of sweltering heat finally dissolved into the morning light. Yet one final sublime act of filial devotion remained incomplete, the quest to secure a lasting peace for his slumbering father. Descending into the hallowed silence of the Duat, Horus bore the radiant recovered eye within his open palm, a beacon of celestial light in the eternal gloom. He approached the silent, mummified form of his predecessor to perform the ultimate magical ceremony of loving restoration. With sacred instruments of iron, the young god performed the hallowed esoteric ritual known as the opening of the mouth, an ancient rite to unseal the silence of the grave. He gently parted those motionless lips and offered the eye of Horus for his father to consume. In that sublime moment, the spark of life flickered anew, restoring the breath of the heavens and the power of speech to the king who had dwelt within the shadows for so long. In accordance with the ritual, he gently touched those sealed eyelids with a cold metal blade to reawaken an eternal spiritual vision. A gentle pressure against his silent throat removed every lingering trace of former paralysis. This highly esoteric practice set a permanent foundation for all future funerary rites within Egyptian mythology. The great king's cold sleeping frame was immediately animated by the warm, vital energy flowing directly from this luminous, celestial offering. Osiris rose majestically from his wooden bier, now fully empowered to govern the endless domain of resting spirits. He took his permanent seat as an eternal Egyptian god of the Underworld to dispense absolute justice upon his hidden throne. With Set securely chained and Osiris restored, an ultimate cosmic harmony known as Math settled gently over a waking universe. This flawless divine order dictated a perfect rhythmic turning of seasons for both gods, as well as mortal men. The terrifying era of prolonged destruction faded completely into the quiet dawn of endless, predictable growth. A steady stream of human souls could now safely journey toward a magnificent hall of two truths waiting below. They faced a fair judgment overseen by a resurrected sovereign, who carefully weighed every mortal heart against a feather of absolute truth. This precise eternal balance is beautifully detailed in an ancient papyrus of Ani, for all future generations to study. Those ancient scribes painted vivid scenes of this underworld tribunal upon long rolls of delicate scrolls. They depicted a watchful god of wisdom, recording every spoken word, as trembling souls confessed their earthly deeds. A perfect cosmic scale determined the final destination for every wandering traveler seeking an eternal resting place. The extensive treasury of magical incantations contained in the sacred Book of the Dead, serving as a celestial atlas for wandering souls, charting a steady course through the starlit shadows of the valley toward a boundless, peaceful haven of everlasting rest. Magnificent images of the great winged disk were carved deeply over the heavy stone doors of every sacred temple, like silent architectural guardians keeping a vigilant watch over slumbering cities. Its vibrant, outstretched plumage offers a permanent visual promise of an unbreakable cosmic security. Bathed in the pale luminescence of a rising silver moon, those painted feathers seem to radiate a soft, protective warmth over the resting earth, while the memory of divine conflict fades entirely into a quiet, comforting assurance that a divine harmony had been reinstated. Endless constellations still rotate with flawless precision above the remnants of these ancient temples, mapping a secure, brilliantly illuminated pathway toward a magnificent celestial paradise, and granting every mortal mind the reassurance of immortality. The sacred records softly whisper a deeply comforting proposal that the mysterious existence of the human soul is not a fragile accident of nature, but a luminous, lingering echo of the divine inheritance, forged in an era when celestial kings still walked the green riverbanks of ancient Egypt. With the cosmic balance restored and a glorious immortality secured for all, humanity could now surrender their own heavy thoughts to the slow, mesmerizing current of the invisible river, floating peacefully under the watchful gaze of divine celestial guides. As the echoes of the great battle fade, and the Nile continues the rhythmic pulsing calm of thousands of years of life, we find ourselves standing on the same silted banks where history first took root. The story of Osiris and Horus is not merely a ghost of the past, but a living current that flows through the present moment. By leaning in to listen, you have taken your place in a chain of remembrance that stretches back 5,000 years, ensuring that the light of the cosmos continues to cast its protective shadow over the world. The ancients understood that every sunset is a promise of a sunrise, and every ending is a quiet preparation for a new beginning. Just as the souls of old navigated the starlit shadows of the Duat toward a peaceful haven, we too navigate the complexities of our own time, guided by the same pursuit of balance and truth. The harmony of Ma'at remains the steady heartbeat of the universe, a silent drum that continues to beat beneath the noise of our modern lives. As you prepare for sleep, let the weight of these ages settle over you like the soft, protective warmth of gilded feathers. Know that you carry within you a luminous, lingering echo of that divine inheritance, a spark that was forged when gods and men walked the green riverbanks together. You are part of this continuity. Your breath is a small part of the great celestial respiration that has animated kings and farmers alike across the vast treasury of time. Allow your thoughts to drift like the sacred solar vessel upon a mirror-still river. The scrolls are rolled tight, the temple doors are guarded, and the scales are in perfect balance. Under the watchful gaze of the eternal constellations, you can safely surrender to the stillness, floating peacefully toward your own horizon of rejuvenating rest.